I'm back in the workshop, but this time it has nothing to do with electronics. Actually, while I was cleaning up after restoring that Hallicrafter's radio, I found a box with a table saw box joint and miter guide made by Craftsman that I had bought, gosh, nearly 20 years ago when I bought this saw. So I got it out and I thought I might try it out. One reason I'm making the video is because one of the people who watch my videos and saw the fact that I was doing one of them in the workshop asked, do you ever make videos of your woodworking projects? And the answer is not so far, but I decided maybe I'll try that. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be making some box joints and see if I can put together some little boxes. I've got some fairly cheap lumber that might work, and I will tell you that I've actually got a little bit of a head start. This is a little box that I cut and put together, and I'll be using that as kind of a model, show you how I did it, and maybe this will be interesting, at least to the person who wanted to know, do you ever make videos of your woodworking projects? You make a box with box joints by cutting these little grooves in the ends of the pieces of wood. Here is a piece of wood that's been cut, and you may notice that there's a fairly uniform spacing here, which is what this jig will help you get. So let me show you how you set up the jig and how I go ahead and cut these, and then maybe we'll cut a few and see if we can put together a nice little box. The first thing that you have to do is get a way to cut a wide kerf. This is a dado set. It consists just of two blades that are put on the arbor of the saw, in other words, the shaft of the motor. And what it does is it cuts a groove. Now, you actually run them through like this. So how do you do that? Well, this jig is set up in such a way that you notice these two pins here. Those, let me turn this up and you'll see, are adjustable with that screw there. And what you do is you adjust those pins so that they just fit the width of the kerf that your dado set cuts, and then you can put these will then slip over the pins. Let me try to show it this way. There. So let me move the camera over to the other side and put it on a tripod so I won't be trying to hold the camera while I'm doing any cutting. And I'll show you how you make a cut. You make a cut by first putting the board up against this, and then you run it through like that, cutting the first groove. Then you put that groove over the holder and you run the next one. You keep doing that until you have run all the way to the edge of the board. At which time you flip the unit over and you repeat the process. Here, move it over, cut again, and so on. When you've done 4 pieces two sides and two fronts, a front and a back and two sides. You then have cut the total that you need. But there is something that you need to be aware of. The pins that are left in this board have to fit in the grooves made in this board. So the first thing you have to do is get this adjusted to the right width. That will then hold the board each time. But the second thing you have to do is you have to get this distance, that is the distance from the edge of this saw or this blade to this edge, to be exactly the right size, so that the pin that is left will fit in the groove. It helps to have a little piece of wood like this cut that exactly fits the width of the saw curve. So that's how I cut this first set. You obviously can use a wider dado blade, in which case you have to set these further apart, and you have to then make sure that you get a proper distance here. But understand the distance between the edge of this and the edge of the blade does not have to be exactly equal to this distance. It just has to be positioned in such a way that you can get a decent fit. So what I'm going to do is take a new piece of wood and cut it and show you how we go about fitting that. I'm going to show you now how you adjust the gap. You do that by loosening these two screws on your miter gauge. That allows you to slide this entire assembly right and left. You do that until you get the right gap between the blade and the fingers. That gap is what sets the width of the part you don't cut on the box joint. I hope you'll pardon the loud noise of the saw, but there's no way I can do this without turning the saw on. So I'll try to do that, maybe do some editing on the audio later. You notice I have the board up against the fingers. You may notice, for some reason, I don't have a deep enough cut on this one, so let me redo it. But it looks like I have both the width of this adjusted to the width of the dado blade, and the distance from the edge of the dado blade, that is right here, this distance, so that I get a pretty good fit. So let's complete the cutting of this board. I won't do it on video, it's just a waste of time and an assault on your ears. So I'll show you the finished result. Now you may notice that on the back side, that is, this went through the blade this way, that is with the blade cutting on this side first. But But you may notice that there are some little curls on the back here. I remove those with a sharp chisel. I guess sharp goes without saying. And there's one other thing I'd like to show you. You notice that in this case there's a little remaining tab on here, which also needs to be removed. Like that. And of course, it's a good idea to check all of these cuts to make sure that you have a good cut all the way across. It's also a good idea to have a dado set that cuts a flat top. Not all of them do. By the way, I'm not sure that Craftsman still makes this particular jig, but I do know that if you go online and you look under that number, if you go to craftsman.com and you search for a manual with that number, 924030, you can get the instruction manual. Now, it's much more than this. This is just a little sales brochure. The full instruction manual contains all the instructions on how to set this thing up and so on. I'm not going to try to teach you all of that. Instead, all I am going to say is you don't have to buy a box joint jig like this. You can make one. This is one that I made some time ago, and you notice that it has a pair of bolts just countersunk in the face with washers and nuts that will fit my miter gauge. And then there is the cut for the dado blade itself. In fact, there are two of them. And in one of them is this piece of wood that is glued. It's the same piece of wood that I showed you earlier, only this is a piece that has been cut off and glued in. So this provides the stop, and in this case, you feed in the opposite direction. In other words, you make the first cut with the board up against this side from the right to left, make your cut. Then you move the board over the pin. Whether you use a homemade jig like this or a store-made fancy one like this, once you get it adjusted for the box, leave it there until you cut all of your boxes, because you're going to find that it's very, very difficult to get the adjustments back exactly where they were. And what's critical is that all of the cuts on all four sides, on both boards, the two sides, the front and the back, all have to be uniform. Otherwise, your box won't go together. So let's continue working on a box, and I will once again not take up a lot of space on video making cuts, but I will show you my progress. Now I've cut two long sides. Now these pieces, that is the ends, are half of the box I showed you earlier. I'm using the same dimensions so I can interchange parts. But I've cut two long sides. Now there is something I should point out, which is why that I cut these sides the length I did. Let me show you that. Here is the assembled box. Not glued up yet, just dry fitted. Notice that the length of the sides were deliberately chosen to fit a specific board width, because remember, you have to put a top and a bottom on this, and it's the length of the sides that you need to match to the top and the bottom. Now, you don't need to have an exact match. In fact, it helps a little if you have just a little bit of overhang so that you can plane things down and make everything fit just exactly right. But you do need to make sure that you don't make your sides too long so that the board you're planning to cut for the top and bottom won't fit. So now I'm going to cut the top and bottom and show you the final cut box, and then perhaps at some point we'll glue it up and I'll show you how you add hinges and other things to it. Now you see the final box cut out. Once again, it's not glued up. I just set the box on the bottom, and then I cut a top to fit as well. Let me try to line this up pretty closely. And you'll notice that there's a little bit of overlap. That's deliberate. That is, down here you see that there is a little lip here, and there's a similar one on the other side. We'll true all of that up using a router bit, flush cutting bit, and we'll also round over the edges and so on. But we'll do all of that after we have glued this box up. I've made a slight change in the way that I'm going about this. Instead of gluing up that box and putting hinges in it, I looked through my supply of hinges, and I haven't been able to find any that fit, so I'm going to have to go buy some hinges. So I decided not to glue it up. Instead, what I've done is I've cut out the pieces for the other 3 boxes. But anyway, that's where I'm going now. I've cut these, so now I'm going to have to finish doing the box joints in all of those pieces over there, and only then will I start gluing stuff up. In cutting these, I've learned a few things that I thought I might pass along that's important, and I thought I'd do it with the saw turned off so you can hear a little better. The first thing is that it's rather important that you keep the board up against the back, that is this edge, these 2 edges together. It's also important that you keep pressure down. It's easier to do with these short boards than with these taller ones because you can't get your finger up here as easily. But I found that the best position is something like this to start with, and then as you get over here to lift this side up and slide this side down so that you're always putting pressure on the board here as well as putting pressure down. One of the reasons that you need to worry about putting pressure down is because of these little curls that I talked about that tend to come up. Now that's partly because of the kind of wood I'm using, and some dado blades might cut better than these do and so on. But at any rate, the reason that's important is when you put these down, and I'm going to turn it the other way for now, you see that those little things there will tend to push you away from this fence. Remember, they're on the back side. So when you cut this one, for example, and go to move it over, this little tab, this little curl, is going to push against this and is going to prevent you from getting tightly up against here. The reason you need it tight is not only for a more uniform cut, but also to reduce vibration as it goes through the blade. So let me go ahead and finish these up. I'm about halfway through, and then we'll take a look at where we get from there. Another thing that I didn't mention is you may notice that I have no guard over the blade here. There is a guard for this saw, and it's a very good one, and I use it all the time. But you can't use it on a cut like this. And the reason is the guard sits here, and this has to go through all the way like that. So the guard would be popped up at an angle like this, and you'd still be exposed to the blade back here. And the guard that I have actually wouldn't do this. In fact, I don't know of a guard for a table saw that will do this. Once again, it's a reason to keep in mind, if you don't know what you're doing, if you can't follow safety instructions, if you haven't had good safety instruction, then it's probably better to leave this to someone to someone else, or find a mentor to help you through the process until you can become a safe woodworker. Another quick aside, I finished 3 of the 4. The 4th cutouts are over there, but I thought I would mention that I assemble the boxes as I go along. So each time that I've cut 4 sides, or front and back and 2 sides, I go ahead and assemble them. Part of the reason for that is to make sure that the jig hasn't slipped. Now, you want to tighten it up pretty well so that it doesn't slip, but sometimes with enough saw vibration and so on, something will slip, and a cut that was fine when you started the process has become a little imprecise as you go along. So that's one reason I assemble the boxes. When I should apologize, I forgot and left the air conditioner turned on, so that's what that noise in the background is. And also, I will point out that you'll notice that those are my glasses and my ear protection, and I mention that partly because I forgot to take off the ear protection in the last segment, so I may have been talking a little louder than I should have. But this, once again, is important safety equipment, and in case you think that I'm harping on it, I am, and the reason is partly because I don't want anybody to get hurt because they failed to follow safety instructions, but I also don't want this to be a bad lesson for the little ones who are going to receive these boxes, because I'm pretty sure that most, if not all of them, are going to be watching this video at some point. So anyway, on with the project. Another thing that I think I forgot to mention was the material I'm using. This is some material that's called craft board. The nominal dimension is 4 inches wide. It's actually, I think, under 4 inches, 3/8 thick, and I buy them in 4-foot boards. But anyway, I thought I'd show you a few of those things, in part because I won't be able to show you again how to put the joints together, because when you see these next, they should be all glued up. Well, they're all glued up, and I'm ready now to finish up the edges, getting ready to put on the bottom and the top. The bottom, of course, will be glued on. The top will be put on with some hinges that I finally have gotten. And so maybe I can finish these things up. So now I'm gluing the bottom on the box, you see there. And basically it just amounts to putting a bead of glue around the edge of the bottom, and then putting the box, setting the box on and clamping it. So I got 3 more of these to do, and then I'll be ready to cut the tops and also to trim up the edges of this. I think I mentioned earlier, and I'll show you how we do that with a flush trim bit later. But that makes sure that the sides and the bottom look like one seamless piece of wood. And when we get there, I'll show you how I do it. Okay, so we've put a bead of glue around the outside, and then we simply set the box on, being careful to align the back edge, and of course the sides. Like that. Then what we will do is put a clamp on, this end, like that. Clamp on the other end. Like that. And put a clamp side here. To make sure that joint is solid. And finally one on this side. Make sure they're firm, but not over tight. And then we'll let it, the glue dry, and we'll be ready to work on the tops. And there they are, 4 little boxes drying in the shop. And that's kind of the end of my poetry, but I will give you a quote from Norm Abram: "You can never have too many clamps." I removed the clamps from the boxes, and I have clamped one of the boxes here. You'll notice there's a board on each side. I do that so to distribute the pressure. If you just use bench dogs, like here against the box, there's a possibility that you'll either leave marks on the box, or what's worse, in order to hold this firmly enough, you may have to squeeze them enough that you'll actually damage the wood. This is pretty thin wood, so one way to avoid that is to use these boards as distribution of the pressure. And then, once again, I'm doing this with the power off, and to just demonstrate. You then take a flush cutting bit. That's this, in which the door, this is unplugged. There is a cutter that is on this edge. In other words, it cuts in that direction, and of course there's another one on the other side. And a bearing, and the bearing is designed to be precisely parallel to the cutting edge. You then take this and run it around the edge of the box. You may recall that I deliberately made the tops and bottoms bigger than they need to be. And the purpose of this is to flush cut them to the sides so that the wood is as smooth as possible on the edges. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to true up the tops of the boxes. So this is the bottom of the box. I'm going to true up the tops, and after that I will get ready to put on the tops with the hinges. This is a joiner. It's a small one. It's made by Craftsman. So let me get that set up, and I'll show you how I am going to use that to help trim up these boxes. Okay, now I'm going to run one through. It's going to get a little noisy. I will finish these with a hand plane. In fact, with a low-angle block plane. I always like to hand finish everything. Even though these boxes are not intended to be furniture quality, but I would like to have a nice flat surface for the top to sit on, and then of course there'll be hinges near the back. So I'm going to do the rest of these, but I won't do them on the video, and then I'll be back to show you the hinges. Here is the first set of hinges installed on the box, and I do it this way by clamping the lid on flush here and then drilling for the screws. Even though they're very small screws, you still want to pre-drill. This is pretty soft wood as well. The harder the wood and the bigger the screws, the more important it is to drill. But even for the tiniest ones like this, if you don't want to strip out the heads, and of course you don't, then you want to pre-drill everything. So let me show you one from the beginning and kind of carry you through the whole process of putting the hinges on. It's rather simple, so it won't take long to show you. So the first step is to clamp the top on with this surface flush and a little bit of an overhang on each side. Remember, we're going to trim this with a trim router when we're done. And then the next thing, by the way, the hinges that I'm using are these Gatehouse 3/4 by 5/8 hinges. I think I got those at Lowe's. So the next step is to put a hinge on like this, and I put it 2 inches from the end. And then to drill the holes. Now I have it 2 inches, so I'm going to hold it in place, this edge parallel with the top, and then I'm going to drill 1 small hole for the first screw. You always want to put in 1 screw and then adjust everything so that all the others line up, because you're going to be off by 1/64 of an inch or so the first time you put one of these on. Now, of course, you want to make sure that the hinge lines up with the joint. That is, the barrel of the hinge lines up with the joint, and then we will tighten it down. Make sure it's aligned parallel to the edge here, and then we'll do the other 3. And there you have the final result with the hinge lined up. Doesn't look like it's there. It's going to focus. All right. So now just do the other one on this box and 2 more boxes, and we should be ready to do the finish work. And here we have the 4 completed boxes. So at this point, there's a little bit of trimming of the top to flush it up. I'll do that with a router. You've seen that already, so I'm not going to show you any more of that. And the next step after that is sanding and finishing, which is really an area that my wife is much better at than I am. So I'm going to turn these over to her at this point and let her decide how she wants to prepare these. And then at some later date, perhaps we'll let our granddaughters decorate them, and our grandson, and each one of them will get a box. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this, and I especially hope that the grandkids enjoy these boxes. So, but until then, we will be seeing you.